AM Minnesota, today we're going to have a terrific conversation here with a great panel of guests. I've been looking forward to this program for a while because, well, we need to have these conversations, healthcare directives with our loved ones. They really shouldn't be all that difficult. I mean, we're talking to people that we love, right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. So our panel today, very distinguished. Gary Lazars is here. I'm so honored to have him in studio. Father Henry Doyle, who's the Grand Marshal of the Faribault Heritage Days Parade, is in studio. Honored to have him here. And you want to introduce yourself, ma'am?
Yes, I am Carrie Yelmgren. I'm the Honoring Choices Minnesota Advanced Care Planning Coordinator for Faribault and Owatonna.
And we also have with us on the phone line, Kathy Wurzer. Good morning, Kathy.
Well, how are you? Good to talk with you all. Thanks.
And you are with the Convenings. Can you tell us what that is, please?
I am with the Convenings. Yeah, thanks. It's a kind of a multi-layered look at how you can maybe live your life fully now all the way toward the end of your life. And the Convenings is kind of an offshoot of work that I did on Minnesota Public Radio with a gentleman, Dr. Bruce Kramer, who lived a really extraordinary life despite having ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And Bruce really taught me and our listeners how to live each day fully, even while you're dying. And so that was kind of spark for the Convenings. We wanted to take some of Bruce's teachings out into the greater Minnesota area, the region, and sit with people and talk about, well, how do you want life to go? And then, how do you want that end part to go as well?
Yeah. Well, Kathy, I don't mean to be morbid, but we're all dying.
That's correct. I hate to say the same thing. And you mentioned why, you've got a good question. Why is it so hard to talk to our loved ones about advanced care planning and end of life? Well, we're kind of staring down the barrel of our own mortality, in a sense, when we talk to our loved ones about these things. And it's hard, and you don't want to think about the end. But I found actually sitting next to Bruce for, it was several years that we did conversations on the radio about his life. Sitting next to him and talking to him about these things, it actually got me to thinking about my life too, and how I wanted to start living it. Instead of, we tend to kind of get ourselves so involved in the day-to-day mundane stuff, you don't kind of think about the bigger picture sometimes. And what really makes for a meaningful life, and Bruce kind of taught me to start looking at those sorts of bigger questions, and to not be afraid of the end. He certainly was not. He was a very brave person.
No, birth is a miracle, and I think death is a miracle. What do you think, Carrie?
Indeed. In this point in time, with the Convenings, Honoring Choices Minnesota will be collaborating with them as we implement our advanced care planning program in both communities as well.
You have a special event coming up June 13th.
We do. The Convenings itself that Kathy will be facilitating and hosting. It's at Medford High School from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And Kathy has more info on registration. Yeah,
we'll talk to her a bit about that. We're going to do a market update here in about a minute. What are these two gentlemen's role in this? Gary's over here looking about as relaxed as a guy can be, and Father Doyle is contemplating his grand marshalship of the Faribault Heritage Days Parade.
Well, I'm grateful to both of them. They are serving on our Honoring Choices Advisory Council for this advanced care planning program.
Oh, okay. So you have a council in each community, you're saying?
We do representatives from both community, and these are two of them.
Well, thanks to them for doing that. Why are you involved in it, Father Doyle?
Why am I involved? Because I do believe it's very important to plan ahead. Plan ahead.
Yeah, and that doesn't just mean elderly folks either.
Right.
We're going to get into that in the next segment. I have to get this market update. Gary, what's your role in this again?
Gordy, all I am is just a humble servant on this council of a lot of these good people. There's a lot of great people on this council.
How many people are on the council, you know?
I'm going to say like 15.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Would be a good number, a good mix of Owatonna and Faribault people. So I was just asked to come on this. I believe strongly in a healthcare directive for everyone. So.
All right. And so do I. But I don't have one. So what is that? AM Minnesota today, we're talking about Honoring Choices Minnesota, hosting the Convenings. Kathy Wurzer will be the host for this, about the importance of advanced care planning discussions, what it means to live life in the face of disability, illness. Ultimately, of course, all of us are going to experience death. The event runs 6:30 till 8 at Medford High School on Tuesday, June 13th. And the reason why Medford was chosen is because it's halfway between Faribault and Owatonna, right?
That's right. Yep.
Carrie's with us. Father Henry's with us. Gary's with us in studio, and Kathy is on the line. Thanks for being so patient, Kathy.
I'm a broadcaster like you are here, Gordy, so I get the concept of being patient.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. You get to host this, and you've done this already in a number of cities. What's been the response, Kathy?
Boy, I'm surprised. You know, when you start, I know when people start hearing about, end of life, death and dying, it's about that, but it's really about the living part of that. So we were not sure what the response was going to be when we first kicked it off last fall in Ely. We've been from Ely to Laverne to St. Cloud and Northfield, and now we're really excited to be in the Owatonna-Faribault area. We initially weren't too sure of the response, but boy, when I came out on stage in Ely, I was shocked at 250 people sitting there, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. We had 500 show up in St. Cloud, and I think the event, the live public event, the way we have it structured, just offers people kind of not a real stressful way to start just contemplating some of these issues. We use local musicians. We have the local folks helping me do some readings. I do some interviews with local experts. And then I just get people talking in the audience about some of these bigger questions that we all kind of face in our lives. And the response has been very, very positive. I'm so happy that people want to start talking about these issues because, they're life-changing. And for goodness sakes, as you all know, in the studio there, we have so many baby boomers who are kind of looking at some of these big issues. Some of us have parents who are getting sick and looking at some serious issues, and we need to start talking about these things.
Yeah, but don't you agree that this should be for everyone, not just the elderly?
Oh, heck, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was shocked to see, I looked out in the audience in Laverne at the high school, and there were several young families, and that included some, young little kids. And I thought, wow, of course, the little kids were with their parents, obviously, but, these were young families. And I thought, well, I wonder what they think of this. And so I went up to a young mom, and she had two little kids, and her husband was with her. And I said, I'm curious, what brought you here tonight? Because, when we all think about these issues, we do think about our elderly parents. And she said, I just feel that with these little kids, I need to start thinking, what happens if something happens to me? What if I'm in an accident? And what if I can't speak for myself? And what happens then? And I know folks like Carrie know full well what can happen when you don't have an advanced care directive. It can be very, very difficult for families, right, Carrie?
Definitely. It can cause a lot of grief, a lot of doubt if they have to make decisions for someone and they don't know their wishes.
Yeah, that would be very hard. I can't even imagine having to do that,
Sometimes there's conflicts. Sometimes it comes conflicts.
Oh, sure, in the city, yeah.
And anger and, just some pulling apart instead of pulling together, at that time. And that's what you really need, especially those times.
That's why I was so appreciative when my mom went into Pleasant View Estates. One of the first things they do is you sit down in the office and you go over a health care directive. What would you like to do? A DNR, do not resuscitate and all that. So all that was in place. So when her end of life came, when we took her to the ER, the nurse said, "You realize your mom has a DNR?" And I said, "Yes." "And you know what that means?" And I said, "Yes. It means I'm saying goodbye," And that was an awesome moment, Henry. It was
Especially
awesome.
since she got to make that decision in advance.
Right. And we all need to make those decisions. So do you have a health care directive?
Yes, I do. I have it on my refrigerator. Nothing's around it. So if someone needs to come in, if I passed out or something there, they go right to the fridge. It's right there. It says what needs to be done.
Right on the refrigerator. I like that idea.
Yep.
How about you, Gary?
Well, we did have, my wife and I had one before, but then I got into some conversation with that, and that's why I got involved with honoring choices. Again, I am a baby boomer, and my mother is 90. I just made her redo a healthcare directive, and I'm trying to get my kids to do the same thing. But the main thing, again, for me especially, is the fact that I want to live life to the fullest, but when it's over, I don't want my family to have to fret,
Right.
whatever it is. I think the big thing is remembering that it's honoring choices. Whatever your choices are, let's be respectful and honor them.
Yeah.
No matter which way you decide you want to go, live life to the fullest, but then let me go the way I want to go. And I just don't want my family to have to worry about it. That's why I made sure that we have ours in place.
Right.
And you can change your directives. You know, it doesn't mean that they're in stone. You can change them every year if you want. But the other thing that's great about this program is that you have access to it. Not getting anything away from the legal trade, but you can fill these out. You just need to have a witness sign it or a notary, whichever way it is. So you can adjust them in any way you want. And that's all the way from when you're sick all the way to the grave. You know, same thing with if you want to be buried or cremated or whatever it is. Those are choices a lot of families get in debates over. So this, hopefully, in the future, just takes everything out of play and everything's in place, and everybody can hopefully lead a stress-free life.
And your family knows what you want.
Unfortunately, they know all too well what I want. I won't go into that now.
Well, yeah, I know. You're very free with your opinions. There's nothing wrong with that. Right, Carrie?
Yes.
I don't mean Gary specifically, but we all need to speak to families about what we want.
Exactly. And the good thing about the convenings in this case is that this offers a perfect gateway to have that conversation. There's no easy way to say, let's talk about this. So this gives that opportunity to families.
Right. Kathy, I love the idea of doing the music and the storytelling. It just adds a whole different aspect.
Sure does, yeah. And I'm glad, again, it makes it kind of a little less, I don't know if the word threatening is the right word to use, but it makes it just a little less stressful, I guess, to start the conversation. You know, music brings people together. It's kind of a way to communicate sometimes, you know. And then that storytelling part, that's the key. I've noticed in each community, there's always a person who has surmounted great odds. You know, they're living with some very serious life-threatening diseases. They've decided, yep, I have this, but I'm going to continue to live each day as fully as I can. And we talked to some of those people up on stage. I'm thinking of one gentleman in Ely, Minnesota, teacher, high school teacher. He's lived with cancer in various forms for 30 years. He's still with us. He's still going, and he had some really interesting things to say about how do you live with death staring you in the face at any given time. And then, as you say, I think that was a really good point that Gary said, you know, I'm going to live my life, and then the end's going to come somewhere along the line. How do I want that to happen? And this teacher, Mike Rouse, was pretty clear about that. And his family knows, you know, we're going to keep going till we can't. And he was clear, and his story was one that was on KARE 11. They're one of our media partners, KARE 11 is, with the convenings. His story was on the air, and boy, did it get a reaction in a positive way about, again, having conversations and some of these issues about how to live until you can't. It was very interesting.
So the convenings does this format, and you tackle other issues, is that right?
Oh, you know, the format is kind of using the music. I use some of the readings from my friend Bruce Kramer's book to kind of illustrate how he lived. And I mentioned these interviews with folks in local communities, including doctors and other experts. We just kind of focus on what makes for a meaningful life, and then our friends in the various communities, the various coalitions, the folks who are getting communities advanced care planning ready, they join me to say, hey, this is what we're doing in this community, this is what we're doing in Northfield, this is what we're doing in Owatonna Faribault. And we try to get people interested in how to even begin to have these conversations. What are the first steps you need to take? So we cover a lot of ground in about 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think Gary touched on it, Carrie, but you really don't need an attorney for this, right?
Not at all. It is, you just need a notary or 2 witnesses to sign your document.
That's it.
That's it.
And again, the event is Tuesday, June 13th at the Medford High School. It gets underway at 6:30. It's free. I don't know if we mentioned that, but it's free. Best 4-letter word in the English language other than love. Free. Right, Father Doyle?
Right.
Grand Marshal of the Faribault Heritage Days Parade, by the way. He's Father Doyle. In all seriousness, it was a great choice, Father.
Oh, thank you.
You've been such a blessing to this Faribault community, and it's super. I like that response. It's super that they chose you for Grand Marshal this year. I just wanted to get that in before the end of the show.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
And I'm sure you feel honored. You've probably given, last rites to a lot of people.
Yes.
In your years. And it's an honor to be there.
Yes, it is. It is. It was yesterday when I went to a family's, as well as to celebrate a life of someone at the end who's passed on. And, I was just recently in Colorado to celebrate a funeral mass for a very dear friend. My dear friend had planned his entire liturgy. And that was, of course, a big relief to the family. But again, his choices were honored. His choices were honored, how he lived the rest of his life. The last 3-4 years had certainly been difficult for him, but he had a directive. They honored that. And then he already had planned his liturgy, everything. He chose the readings, the hymns, everything was chosen for that. The only thing he hadn't chosen was the homily. But he was a great timekeeper of homilies. So when I ended the homily, I said, well, I hope I haven't gone over time, Bob, because I know you're keeping time on this.
Bob didn't like him to go too long.
Right. No, he did not. But he had planned it all, and that really helped the family. They knew what he wanted and needed, and it was a relief to them. And they were really pleased and happy that they would honor his choices, and it helped also with the family, keeping them together and united.
Yeah, because as you mentioned earlier, family dynamics is very interesting sometimes.
Yes, because previously in April I had to deal with that with a family that there was two sides, two against one at some point, and that was not very pretty, not very pretty at all.
So if you lay it down in black and white, Carrie, it has to be followed, right?
It does. It should be followed. It is up to the person, though, to share it with all the people who need to follow it. So their physicians need to have a copy. All of their healthcare agents or loved ones that they would like need to have a copy. And they should have it on their refrigerator at home as well.
So, Kathy, because we are talking about this, I don't mean to be too personal, but do you have a healthcare directive?
Gordy, thanks for bringing that up, because I figured I should get my act together. Since I'm doing the convenings, I probably should have one. And I just got mine done a few months ago. Yeah. It took me all that time to kind of figure it out, to think about it, and I did, and I actually feel like I've done something for my family, so there's no, gray area here. I'm pretty clear, and I feel like I can kind of go ahead now in my life without kind of worrying about that, if that makes sense to you and your guests. But the hardest choice, and maybe Carrie can address this too, is who I chose for my health care agent. That's the person who's going to speak for me if I can't. And I had to go through that list of people in my head, and I thought, well, my family's so indecisive. I thought, well, I should probably pick a person who can follow it through and, and make sure that my wishes are known. So that was an interesting decision-making process for me. I don't know if Carrie can address that at all.
I don't know. Before I get to Carrie, though, did you pick Father Doyle?
I wish I could have. See? It would have been perfect.
I'm just kidding. Carrie, you go ahead.
Sure. Well, the good thing about an advanced directive is you don't also just have to pick one healthcare agent. So you can have a primary, then you can have a secondary, and a third. You can have a whole list of people that you would like to be involved, but there should be a primary.
And that can change over time, too.
It certainly can.
I hate to say this, but you could get divorced if it was your spouse. All kinds of things could factor into this.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people assume it's going to be their spouse. That's not always necessarily the right person for the job, so
They're
to speak.
the closest emotionally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you really want someone who can stay cool, calm, and collected, and make and just advocate for your decisions and make decisions on your behalf that follow your directive instead of, oh, this was my spouse. I'm so overcome with grief that I can't make decisions.
Now, Gary touched on something earlier I think is very important. He said he's going to talk to his kids about this. It comes to mind that when your child goes off to college, you might want to have that in place.
Definitely,
yes. You never know.
Anybody 18 plus, any adults should start considering this and start having the conversation. And of course, it is going to change over the course of their lifetime, but they can continue to revisit it.
Yeah, because you're in different stages of life.
Mm-hmm. And different stages of health. Mm-hmm.
Gary and I are middle-aged men right now. I think Father Doyle is in the same boat. We're kind of in the same age bracket, right? Wouldn't you consider yourself a middle-aged guy? You're not a senior.
As long as we
yet.
live to 120, I guess I'm middle-aged.
Okay. How about you, Father Doyle?
Well, I'm as young as I'm going to ever be, huh? Every day. No, I'm a youthful 65.
Well, there you go. See, and things will change.
Yes.
Rather quickly now, from 65 to the end of life.
Right. They certainly could.
So Honoring Choices suggests that you revisit it anytime you have a milestone birthday, or if someone close to you or a loved one dies, because you might learn something from their experience through their death, and anytime you have a change in your health as well.
Sure. So, Kathy, do you have any suggestions on how we approach this with our loved ones? Because, you know, sometimes, like you said before, it gets to be a little emotional.
Oh, it can get really emotional. It brings up a lot of different things, some baggage sometimes, you know. My mom just recently had surgery for lung cancer, and she knows what I've been doing with the convenings, obviously, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to go down this road. I'm going to have to, just push that door open, and we have to have these conversations because I need to know what if something were to happen. And even all the experience that I've had with this conversation and this topic, it still was tough because she's my mom, and I just swallowed hard and said, so what happens, do you suppose, if, and we got into this really lovely conversation. It's just kind of you start with baby steps, though, I have to say. I mean, maybe you can start the conversation by, what means the most to you in your life at this point, and kind of open the door that way. And I started that with my mom, and we had this very rich conversation, and I actually learned some stuff about her and what she thinks about and what's important to her that I didn't even know before. So she had surgery. She came out of it great. Everything's fine. She's going to be fine. But it really, it kind of opened a whole new chapter in our relationship. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo-y and kind of deep, but actually it worked out really, really well. And I'm glad we had the conversation. I really am.
Yeah, I had some really neat conversation with my mom, too, about what she wanted at her funeral and all that stuff. That was very, very cool. Now
I have to ask you, Gordy. I'm going to put you on the spot because, being in the business, I'm used to asking questions. Now, did you say you don't have a directive?
I do not. I have to get busy here on this because I'm a big believer in it. And I think I read somewhere, wasn't there a survey that said, Carrie, that most people think that it should be done, but they procrastinate like me? Is that what they do?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that normal?
Well, unfortunately, it's a national trend that we are all in that boat where we have the best of intentions about completing a document like this and having the conversation, but unfortunately do not follow through.
I think what's helpful is setting a deadline. And that's what helped me to get mine done was a deadline.
You said by 65 I'm going to do this.
No, it was, you gave it a date. I met with up at the hospital and we went through the whole packet, and then I went on my own to do it and everything, but give it a deadline. You need a deadline and a reasonable one. Don't say I'm going to do this in 3 months, but give it a reasonable amount of time, but don't procrastinate, as we say.
Good advice, don't you think, Carrie?
Definitely, yes, of course.
To set a deadline. I love it. So again, the event is June 13th. That's a Tuesday. Honoring Choices hosting the convenings. This is the first step in this process, though, right, Carrie?
It is. So this is really the kickoff to the implementation of our advanced care planning program in both Faribault and Owatonna. And there are really two main things that are going to contribute to the success of this program. One is our extraordinary support that we've gotten from community leaders and our sponsors, the Faribault Area Hospice Foundation, the Owatonna Hospital Foundation, and Federated Insurance. And then the other is volunteers, and we are currently looking to grow our volunteer base right now. We have two different kinds that we're looking for. One is called an ambassador. Both of these are trained. An ambassador is someone who's really a loudspeaker out in the community about advanced care planning, educating others about it, giving them resources for our program. And then the other is a facilitator, and that is a trained Honoring Choices volunteer facilitator who is actually a partner in planning, helping individuals and families complete their directive and get through the process.
I don't know if I can think of anything else to add. How about you, Father Doyle?
I can't think of anything either other than for all of us to get on the program, get with it.
Yeah, and we want a great turnout in Medford, right?
Yeah.
Please, yes. that'd
Right,
be
Kathy?
great.
You don't want to be talking to just two people.
No, I want to be talking to a whole auditorium filled with people. And I'm going to come back, too. We're doing a reconvening in a few months to see how everybody's doing in the Owatonna Faribault area after this first kickoff event on June 13th. So, yeah, I hope to see people there. It's, as you say, Gordy, it's free. We got coffee and cookies afterward. And, you know, I think people are going to find it's going to be a really interesting night.
So are you baking the cookies, too?
Yeah, I'm a full-service kind of moderator, you know. I bake the cookies, brew the coffee, have the discussion. You know, I got the whole thing going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've literally been to every corner of the state with this. You said Ely and now Medford.
I know. Go figure, right? Yeah, and we coming up in the next few months, we're figuring with all the interest from other cities when they hear about us, we could take our show's going to be on the road for quite some time, we think.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm going to let you go, Kathy. I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all on the 13th.
All right, fantastic. Thanks again, Kathy.
Take care.
Kathy Werzer, she'll be the MC, the host. I didn't know exactly what to call the title,
Yep.
but she is kind of bringing all this together.
She is. She will keep the conversation going.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is what I failed to do here in the last minute of the show. But at least it was the last minute and not, 4 minutes into the show.
Oh,
right,
you've done a
Carrie?
fine job,
Oh, yeah.
fine job. Thank you for letting us
Thank
be
you
on
for
program
having us.
today.
Yeah. Now that we know that I'm the only person on the show today that does not have a health care directive,
Well, we can help with that.
but I am a believer in it. It was so nice. Both my mom and dad.
Gordy, I happen to have one
Yeah,
down in
there's
my
that.
office I could bring to you.
Well, there you go. That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota. Hope to see everybody at the Dam Days Parade tonight. And Monday, June happenings at the Paradise Center for the Arts is the topic. That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota on KDHL AM.